Which is better? Let's find out. Let's watch the video. Hello amigos, this is Pablo Garcia, the engineer photographer. A couple of weeks ago, Adobe released Super Resolution, a new option in Photoshop to increase the resolution of files up to a factor of 4. And it's been getting a lot of good press. So I decided to compare it against TOPAZ GIGAPIXEL that has been in the market now for quite some time. And I did a review of TOPAZ GIGAPIXEL a few months ago, and you can find the link here on the upper right. So let's go see why we want to increase the resolution of our photos. So why more resolution? Sometimes we have photos taken from older cameras. For example, my first digital camera was only 3 megapixels. My latest camera, 45. So a lot of things have changed in a dozen years. Sometimes we also have images from our phones that tend to be lower resolution. Or perhaps we edited the images and we cropped the image because we wanted to only preserve a portion of it for the composition that we wanted. But why do we want more resolution? Perhaps we want to display the images. Now, if we're sharing them in social media, we only need about 1 megapixel or less. If we're displaying it on our monitors or TV at 720 or 1080 or high definition, we only need in the neighborhood of 1 or 2 megapixels. But technology is improving, the displays and the TVs, now we're talking about 4K and 8K TVs, and for those we're going to need in the order of 18 to 32 megapixels to take full advantage of the display resolution. And especially we have big TVs and big monitors, we want to take advantage of the full resolution. Or perhaps we want to print. Now we print them small, 2 or 3 megapixels may be sufficient, but as the print size is increasing and we want to have a good print, and usually it does at least 300 pixels per inch or sometimes a little higher, we need to have a lot more pixels. For example, 12 by 18 is about 20 megapixels, 16 by 24, we're talking 30 or more megapixels. So sometimes we do need to increase the resolution of the images to get the results that we want. Here we are in Photoshop, and this is the image that I'm going to use for the test. I like this image because there is a lot of fine detail on the fur of this beautiful animal, and then areas of the image that had very little detail, like in the snow or in the grass that is around the animal. I used this same image for the TOPAZ GIGAPIXEL test that I did a few months ago. Now this is a very good size image. This image is about 16 megapixels. You can see here in the bottom is almost 5000 by 3300, so 16 megapixel image. And what I did is I created 2 versions of this image. One in which I reduced resolution a factor of 4, that means 2 in the vertical and 2 on the horizontal for a total of 4. So basically I went from 16 megapixels to 4. And then a more extreme where I went a factor of 4 on vertical, factor of 4 in horizontal, and basically I went from 16 megapixels to 1. And what we're going to do is run those smaller versions in super resolution in Adobe Photoshop and then in Topaz and see how well the results compare to this original image. So let's compare this image with the lower resolution versions that we're going to use. So here's a side-by-side comparison. On the left, we have the original image that I showed you. There is going to be a reference image, the 16 megapixel image. I zoom in quite tight. You can see still quite a bit of detail on the forehead and on the eye of this beautiful animal. On the middle is the 4 megapixel version where I reduced it by a factor of 4, and you can start to see pixelation, especially on the forehead, less sharpness around the eye. And on the right is the 1 megapixel image, and you see we lost a lot of the detail, fine detail on the hair of the animal, and you can even see pixelation on the eye. The middle image we're gonna use, the right image we're gonna use for the extreme test. Let's go to Adobe Photoshop Super Resolution first. Well, here we are in Adobe Camera Raw, and you have to be in Adobe Camera Raw in order to use the Super Resolution option. If you have a RAW file, when you bring it into Photoshop, it will automatically open Adobe Camera Raw. But if you have a TIFF file like the one that I have, or a JPEG file, Adobe Camera Raw won't open automatically. It will open normally in Photoshop. And if you try to apply Camera Raw as a filter, super resolution is not available. So that's the first minus for the implementation that Adobe had done. If you want to open a TIFF directly in Adobe Camera Raw, you have a couple of options. One is if you're using Bridge to manage your photos, there is an option in Bridge to tell Photoshop that to open Camera Raw directly. But I don't use Adobe Bridge. So the other option is open any RAW file, and when Camera Raw opens, you can go to the settings here on the upper right, click on settings, go under file handling, and here you're going to see a couple of options. You'll see that for the JPEG, the middle option that is right now enabled is the default option where JPEG files will open normally in Adobe Photoshop. But for TIFFs, I selected the bottom option. Anytime a TIFF file is open in Photoshop, by selecting this bottom function, Adobe Camera Raw will open directly. So that's kind of the workaround you have to do. And again, to me, this is a minus for the interface. Let's hope Adobe corrects this in the future. So now here we are. This is the 4 megapixel version. How do we increase the resolution? Well, it's very easy. All we have to do anywhere on the image, do a right click. You'll see this enhance, even a shortcut or Control-Shift-D. You click on enhance. Another window is going to open up. The first little box is grayed out because that's what's only enabled for RAW. So we don't have a RAW file. You see super resolution here already enabled. There is a small preview window. You can move it around, or you can click on the little loop at the bottom and then move the cursor, the crosshair where you want it. I'm going to go to the eye of the animal, and that's the enhanced version. This is minus. So minus has quite a bit less detail. Enhanced has quite a bit more detail. Maybe hard to see on your monitor, but this is the preview that we get. Very small preview. So now all I have to do is select enhance. It's going to calculate, and it works very fast actually. So that's one good thing for super resolution. And it created a copy. This new copy is, you can see here at the bottom, this one is almost 5,000 by 3,300. So basically went from a 4 megapixel file to a 16 megapixel file. And it's a DNG file. And it's already saved in the same folder where you had the original. Now, it's a DNG file. If you want to use a TIFF, you have to take the extra step to go on the image. Here at the bottom, you can see a little down arrow. You can select there, and then you can tell it to save a TIFF or any different format that you want. I'm not going to do that this time. Now, let's say you wanted to add another pass of super resolution and increase it even more. For example, that's what I needed to do for my extreme test, where I needed to go from 1 megapixel to 16. Super resolution gives us a fixed factor of 4. So basically I need to go from 1 to 4 and then from 4 to 16. So I had to do 2 different passes. If I had this image that super resolution already processed once, and I do right click and I try to enhance the image, it tells me this image has already been enhanced. It doesn't allow me to do a second pass on top of the image that it already produced. But there is a workaround. And the workaround is I had to save it as a TIFF, the 4 megapixel version, for example, and then bring it back in and then apply super resolution in top of that. And that's what I had to do for the 1 megapixel version. Basically, do it in 2 different steps. Come in, apply super resolution, created a DNG, save a TIFF version as well, then bring that TIFF in, already at 4 megapixels, apply super resolution again to it, and result in 16. Frankly, I don't like that. I think it's a little cumbersome, and hopefully Adobe corrects that. So later we're going to compare the results with the results that we got from TOPAZ. So now let's go to TOPAZ. I had opened TOPAZ GIGAPIXEL already, and TOPAZ GIGAPIXEL actually is quite easy to use. All you have to do is open or drag a file. In this case, I'm going to drag my 4 megapixel version, okay? And I'm going to come in, bring it in, and that's it. You open it up. And what I like about TOPAZ GIGAPIXEL is that it has an automatic mode, just like we saw with Super Resolution. We're gonna have auto update previews and a scale. I can do a factor of 2, and that's what we want in this case. And this is the difference. Super Resolution tells us it's a factor of 4, but that's a factor of 4 in resolution. Basically, you give it 4, it will produce 16. TOPAZ GIGAPIXEL, when it says a factor of 2, is actually 2 in the horizontal and 2 in the vertical for a total of 4. And when it says 4, it's 4 vertical, 4 horizontal for a factor of 16. So we have to keep that straight. So for this test, I started with 4. I went to end up with 16. If I had brought in my 1 megapixel version, all I need is one single pass in TOPAZ, selecting the 4x to give me 4 vertical, 4 horizontal for a factor of 16, and do it all in one pass. So that's an advantage on TOPAZ. So for now, we're just going to do a factor of 2. The other thing that I like about TOPAZ, besides having an automatic mode, is that it also gives you a few options where you can suppress noise and remove blur to fine-tune the results. I'm not going to touch them. I'm at 100% automatically, so we can compare apples with super resolution. And the other thing about TOPAZ is that we have this larger preview that we can look. And if I zoom in a little tighter, it's going to have to recalculate for the preview, but now you can see the original image, 4 megapixel image on the left, and the results of TOPAZ on the right. And you can see it did a very nice job of adding additional pixels and increasing the detail of the image. Now all I have to do is save it, and it's going to save it as a TIFF back into the original folder. So that was pass 1 using the 4 megapixel input image, and I repeated the same thing with the 1 megapixel image doing the 4x. So now let's go to Photoshop and compare the results that we got from Adobe Photoshop Super Resolution and TOPAZ GIGAPIXEL. So here we are in Photoshop, and we're gonna do the side-by-side comparison. On the left, we have the original image. In the middle, we have the results of Adobe Super Resolution. We went from 4 to 16 megapixels. And on the right, we have the results of TOPAZ GIGAPIXEL, where we went again from 4 to 16 megapixels. And at this resolution, all images actually look very nice. They look almost pretty much the same. So let's zoom in and see what we get. So now we're zooming in into the head of the animal, and as you can see, both Super Resolution in the middle and GIGAPIXEL on the right did a very nice job on recreating pixels, because when you compare it to the original image, they actually look pretty good. I can see in my monitor that TOPAZ did a better job, especially here in the fine detail of the forehead. I can still see a little blurriness on Super Resolution. When I compare the eyes, maybe GIGAPIXEL is a little bit sharper. Let's move to another section of the animal. When we look here, all the fine detail on the fur of the animal, actually both of them look very nice. A lot of detail. I think they both look about the same. Let's move to another section. And looking here at the leg, the fur on the leg actually looks pretty good. And this piece of grass sticking on the snow, they actually, both of them look very good compared to the original image. Maybe if I look really closely, I like the results on GIGAPIXEL a bit. It seems to have a little bit less noise or pixelation around the snow and the grass, but the advantage is very slight. So at the 4x test, both of them did pretty good, and perhaps a slight advantage on TOPAZ GIGAPIXEL. Let's compare now the extreme test when we went from 1 to 16. Okay, so here we are again On the left, we have the original 16 megapixel image. In the middle, we have the results of super resolution, where we took a 1 megapixel image, apply a factor of 4, save that image as a TIFF, and apply another factor of top on top of it for a total 16. And on the right is Topaz, where we selected 4x on Topaz. That really is 4 vertical and 4 horizontal for a total of 16 in one pass. So that's the result of it. And as I look here in the monitor at this resolution, it actually looks very good. All of them look very good. They can probably do a good job of displaying or printing at this size. But now let's zoom in and look at the details. So now you can actually see some differences, but we're really zooming in quite tight. And as you compare with the original image, you can see the super resolution in the middle. We see still quite a bit of pixelation. It wasn't able to recreate all the fine hair detail that was on the head of the animal. The eye still looks a little bit blurry. And when you look at the results of Gigapixel on the right, Gigapixel actually did quite a bit better than Adobe Super Resolution. We still have quite a bit of detail on the fur. Granted, this is an extreme test. It doesn't compare extremely well to the original, but just look at the results. Actually, this can fool a lot of people. The eye is a little bit blurry. We don't have a lot of sharpness in the eye, but there's still quite a bit of detail on the fur. It looks like the image was taken slightly out of focus, but there's enough detail so that you can print probably 12 by 18 with no problems. So I'm actually very impressed with the results. And in this case, I think for this extreme test, Gigapixel has an edge on super resolution. Let's look at another section of the animal. So here you see the mid body of the animal, a lot of fine detail on the original image, quite a bit of blurriness on Adobe Super Resolution, and it's still an okay amount of detail. It lost a lot of the fine hairs, but you can still see sufficient texture on the body of the animal. Now let's look at the leg and the grass. The same thing happens here. Actually, I think Topaz Gigapixel looks better. If I look at the original, I had some noise and a little of pixelation zoom in this tight on the grass and in the snow, and I don't see that at all. However, there are some artifacts. I see some gray areas, some transitions on the snow here. Adobe Super Resolution looks a little bit blurry. The bottom line is applying artificial intelligence to increase the resolution is a good approach, but Topaz, I think, has an edge. So in summary, I think both of them really well. Going from 4 to 16, it was hard to tell the difference between Adobe Photoshop Super Resolution and Topaz Gigapixel. Going from 1 to 16, our extreme test, it was clear that Topaz Gigapixel did much better job than Adobe's resolution. But again, that's an extreme test. On usability, I think Topaz Gigapixel is better. Adobe went the path of a simple click to do a factor of 4, but it doesn't give you any options to fine-tune the results. Also, you had to open in Camera Raw, but we hear that Adobe is going to be adding this same functionality directly into Lightroom, perhaps in a not too distant future. So that will be really good. On results, as you saw, Gigapixel works better for the 4x case, a lot better for the 16x case. But that's only for the test image that we process. Why? Well, and that has to do with the AI or artificial intelligence implementation. Basically, in artificial intelligence, what we try to do is mimic the human brain, where we have 80 to 100 billion neurons, and each one of those neurons is connected to more than 1,000 neurons around it. And that's the strength of our brain, is all those connections and the number of neurons. In a very simplistic way, the artificial brains or deep neural networks trying to mimic that by having artificial neurons in layers connected to other neurons around them, and using a large image data set to train it. These are not programmed in the traditional way, they're trained. So the training depends on how large and how varied that training set is. How many different thousands of images are they using? And also, the results were going to depend on the specific structure of the artificial neural brain, right? How many neurons, how many cells, how it reinforces learning, and so on. So when a new image like ours is presented to a trained system, it depends on the specific training, the specific network, and also on the image we're giving it. If we have used a different image, the results would have been different. And, we just had to do a lot of testing and trying to get a sense on where Topaz or Super Resolution do better one than the other. That's why I like to have them both, because they may work better for different type of images. Anyway, I hope you like this comparison. If you like this series of videos, please don't forget to subscribe, send me a comment, let me know what you think, and tell a friend, and I'll see you next time.